Welcome, everyone. I'm Dusky Nights, and before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you? Drop a comment below. Also, I want to know what kind of stories you enjoy, and make sure to listen till the end. It was just a music box until it started playing on its own, and then I remembered. Dust floated in the sun coming through my attic window, lighting up old things from my past. I, Clara Bellwether, age 45, a writer, had finally decided to go through my grandma's stuff. She'd died a few months ago, leaving me her big old house in the quiet countryside of upstate New York, a place I hadn't been to since I was little. The city, with all its noise and distractions, never felt right for me, and I hoped that maybe here, surrounded by family history, I could finally find some peace. My own life had been messy, a bad marriage, a job that never really worked out, and a feeling of being uneasy that followed me everywhere. Among the old furniture and dusty pictures, I found a small, fancy wooden box. It was hidden in a dark corner of the attic, almost covered by some old blankets. Curious, I picked it up. The wood felt smooth and cool. It was a music box, I realized, like the one my grandma used to have. I remembered the pretty songs that would fill her house when she wound it up. I felt a wave of nostalgia. I carefully opened the lid. Inside, on a bed of faded velvet, was a tiny, shiny silver key. I picked it up, wondering what it opened. I looked at the box closely. There was a small keyhole on the side. I put the key in and turned it. With a soft click, the music box started playing. A pretty song filled the attic, a tune I didn't know, but it felt familiar. It was beautifully sad, making me feel something deep inside. As the music played, pictures flashed in my mind, pieces of memories from a time I couldn't quite remember. A big dance hall, people dancing, a person wearing a mask. The music stopped suddenly, leaving a heavy silence. I closed the lid, feeling uneasy. The song was strange, bringing up feelings I didn't understand. I decided to put the music box away, to forget about it. But that night, I couldn't sleep. The song kept playing in my head, a haunting echo from the past. I tossed and turned, my mind full of questions. Who was the masked person? What was the promise I had forgotten? The next morning, I went back to the attic. Pulled by something I couldn't resist, I found the music box right where I had left it. I opened the lid, and the song started again. This time, I listened carefully, trying to understand the tune, to unlock the memories it held. As the music played, the pieces of memories came back, clearer now, more real. I saw myself, younger, dancing with the masked person, his hand holding mine tight. We were laughing, happy, lost in the moment. And then a different picture flashed in my mind. A dark forest, a winding path, a promise whispered in the moonlight. The music stopped, leaving me breathless, my heart beating fast. I knew I had to find out what these memories meant. I had to learn the truth about my past, even if it meant facing something I didn't want to remember. I looked at the music box again, searching for a clue, and then I found it. A small, almost invisible line on the bottom. I carefully opened it. Inside, hidden under the music parts, was a note. It was written on a small piece of paper, the ink faded but still readable. My name was at the top, in writing that was both familiar and strange. I unfolded the note, my hands shaking. The words swam in front of my eyes, a message from the past, a promise I had made a long time ago, a promise I had forgotten, a promise I now had to keep. The note told me to go back to the big dance hall, the place where I had danced with the masked person, the place where I had made the promise. I felt a wave of fear. I didn't know what was waiting for me there, but I knew I had to go. I had to face the past, to deal with the memories that were haunting me. I packed a bag, my hands shaking. I felt like I was being pulled back in time, back to a life I didn't know. As I drove to the address on the note, an old, empty house deep in the woods, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that someone or something was waiting for me. The house was even scarier up close, a dark, spooky building covered in shadows. The dance hall was just like I had seen it in my memories, big and fancy, but now filled with a creepy silence. As I walked into the room, the music box song started playing again by itself. The air got cold, a chill that went through me, and then I saw him, the masked person, standing in the middle of the dance hall, his back to me. He was tall and scary, making me feel a sense of power and mystery. I took a step towards him, my heart beating fast. As I got closer, he slowly turned his head. I gasped. His face, it was familiar, but wrong. His eyes were empty, black holes, but they looked right at me with a look that made my blood run cold. His lips opened, showing teeth that were too sharp, too long. And then he smiled, a slow, mean smile that sent shivers down my spine. "You've come back," he whispered, his voice rough and scary. "You've remembered," I screamed, a sound of pure terror. I stumbled back, tripping over the rug and falling to the floor. He took a step towards me, and then another. His empty eyes stared at me, his smile getting wider, showing rows of sharp, pointed teeth. I scrambled backwards, trying to get away, but he was too quick. He was on me, his cold hand grabbing my wrist. His touch was like ice, burning my skin. I thrashed, trying to break free, but his grip was too strong. He pulled me closer, his face inches from mine. I could smell him, a sweet, sick smell, like rotting flowers. "You can't leave me," he whispered, his breath cold on my cheek. "You promised." And then he kissed me. His lips were cracked and blue, his touch like death. I felt a jolt of coldness, a sharp pain that went through my body. My vision blurred, my head spun. I felt myself slipping away into the darkness. The last thing I saw was his smile, a happy, evil smile that would haunt my dreams forever. And the last thing I heard was the music box playing on and on, a haunting song that would always be in my soul. What was the promise Clara made? And who was the masked person? Share your guesses in the comments. Liam's been dead for months, so why was he sitting on my bed, smiling? The wind howled like a banshee, rattling the windows of my isolated cabin. I, Isla O'Connell, age 37, a botanical illustrator, had sought refuge here in the remote Scottish Highlands to escape the noise and the memories. Edinburgh, with its bustling streets and constant reminders of Alistair, was too much. Alistair, my fiancé, gone too soon, a victim of a rock-climbing accident. This stone cottage, nestled beside a loch reflecting the moody sky, was supposed to be a place to heal, to find some quiet. But quiet was a tricky thing, especially when the storm raged outside, mirroring the chaos within me. It was February 14th, Valentine's Day. Ridiculously, a day that once meant shared laughter and cozy dinners was now a harsh reminder of my loss. I tried to ignore the date, losing myself in my work. A detailed drawing of rare orchids I'd brought with me. The delicate flowers seemed to mock me with their vibrant beauty, their fragile lives continuing even after Alistair's had been cut short. Outside, the storm grew stronger, the wind's cries sounding almost human. A sharp rap at the door made me jump. I wasn't expecting anyone. The nearest village was miles away, down a narrow, winding track that was surely blocked by snowdrifts. I hesitated, a shiver of unease crawling up my spine. Who could be out there in this weather? Another knock, louder this time. I peeked through the curtained window. Nothing. Just the swirling snow and the howling wind. Probably just a tree branch, I mumbled, trying to calm my nerves. I opened the door a tiny bit, leaning against the wind. Still nothing. Just the storm. As I was about to close the door, I noticed it. A small heart-shaped box lying on the doorstep. It was wrapped in pale green paper, tied with a thin silver ribbon. Valentine's Day. The absurdity was almost cruel. I picked it up, my fingers brushing against something cold and damp. I frowned. The box felt wet. Back inside, I set the box on the table. The pale green paper seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. I hesitated, a strange feeling of dread washing over me. This wasn't normal. This felt wrong. But curiosity, that powerful human instinct, pulled me forward. I untied the ribbon, the silver shimmering in the lamplight. Inside the box, nestled on a bed of white satin, was a single white camellia. Its petals were perfect, delicate, almost too perfect. But it was the stem that made my heart pound. It was wrapped in thorns. The sharp points stained a dark, ominous color. A chill went down my back. This was no ordinary Valentine's Day gift. This was a message that sparked a wave of fear within me. I picked up the camellia, my fingers brushing against the thorns. A tiny drop of blood appeared on my fingertip. I flinched, dropping the flower as if it had shocked me. The blood on my finger. It was almost black. The wind outside grew stronger, the howling now a distinct whisper. Isla, my name. I spun around, my heart racing. The room was empty. Just the shadows moving on the walls, playing tricks on my eyes. It's just the wind, I reassured myself, trying to fight the fear that was taking hold. But the whisper came again, closer this time. Isla. I grabbed the poker from beside the fireplace, my hand trembling. I knew I wasn't alone. Something was in the cottage with me, something that was looking for me. I moved through the rooms, each step echoing in the heavy silence. The whispers followed me, becoming louder, more insistent. Isla, Isla. I reached the bedroom door, my breath catching in my throat. The door was slightly open. I pushed it wider, the hinges groaning softly. The room was dark. The only light coming from the moon peeking through the clouds. And then I saw it, sitting on the edge of my bed, a figure silhouetted against the moonlight. It was familiar, too familiar. It was Alistair, My heart leaped with a mix of hope and terror. "Alistair?" I whispered, my voice shaking. The figure slowly turned its head. My blood turned to ice. It was Alistair, but it wasn't. His face, it was thin. The skin stretched too tightly over his skull. His eyes, they were empty, hollow, lifeless, and yet they were fixed on me with a piercing gaze that made my blood run cold. His lips parted, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too long, and then he smiled, a slow, predatory smile that made shivers crawl down my spine. "Happy Valentine's Day, Isla," he whispered, his voice a low, chilling rasp. I screamed, a raw sound of fear. I stumbled back, tripping over the rug and falling to the floor. He stood up, his movements stiff, natural. He took a step toward me, and then another. His empty eyes stared at me, his smile growing wider, showing rows of sharp, pointed teeth. I scrambled backwards, trying to get away, but he was too quick. He was on me, his cold hand grabbing my arm. His touch was like ice, burning my skin. I thrashed, trying to break free, but his grip was too powerful. He pulled me closer, his face inches from mine. I could smell him, a musty, sickly sweet smell, like decaying flowers. "You can't leave me, Isla," he whispered, his breath icy against my cheek. And then he kissed me. His lips were cracked and blue, his touch like death. I felt a surge of coldness, a searing pain that spread through my body. My vision blurred, my head swam. I felt myself drifting away into the darkness. The last thing I saw was his smile, a triumphant, predatory smile that would haunt my nightmares forever. And the last thing I heard was the sound of the wind whispering my name over and over again. Isla, Isla, Isla. What happened to Isla? Was it the grief, the isolation, or something much more sinister that claimed her? Share your thoughts in the comments below. A heart carved in the ice. Pretty, right? Wrong. It started beating, and then she came. The crisp winter air nipped at my cheeks. A welcome change from my stuffy office. I, Lena Peterson, age 32, a history teacher at a small college in Vermont, really needed this break. Grading papers and getting ready for classes had been tough, and the frozen lake seemed perfect. Mark, my boyfriend, was already putting on his skates, laughing as he wobbled a bit. He works with computers, all about numbers and details, which is so different from my love of old stories and what happened long ago. But we fit together well, like two pieces that belong. Or, at least, I thought so. The lake was huge and white, shining in the sun, with snowy trees all around. It looked like a picture from a storybook, a beautiful winter place. We skated, holding hands, the sound of our blades on the ice mixing with the wind in the trees. It felt so good to be outside, away from work, and away from this feeling like something was missing, something I couldn't quite name. We skated for a while, enjoying being free and breathing the fresh air. Then Mark said we should go to a quieter part of the lake, a hidden spot away from everyone else. As we went into the quiet area, I saw something strange, a heart shape carved in the ice. It was perfect, the lines so clean. It looked like someone had just done it. "That's weird," I said to Mark, pointing at the carving. "Who would do that out here?" He just shrugged. "Maybe some couple in love," he said, smiling. "Or maybe it's just how the ice is." I wasn't so sure. Something about the carving felt special, like it meant something. We skated closer, curious. When we got to the carving, I saw something else. The ice around it was a little different, a darker blue. And then I heard it, a soft thumping sound, like a heartbeat. I looked at Mark, feeling uneasy. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. He frowned, listening. "Hear what?" "That thumping," I said. "It sounds like a heart." Mark said I was imagining things. "You're just tired," he said, chuckling. "It's probably just the ice moving." But I wasn't imagining it. The thumping was getting louder, stronger. And then the ice under us started to shake. I got scared. This wasn't normal. It was creepy. I tried to move away, but my skates wouldn't move. Mark looked at me, his smile gone, looking confused and scared. "Lena, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice shaking. The ice under us started to crack, lines spreading out from the heart carving. The thumping got louder, like a drum in my ears. And then the ice broke. We fell into the freezing water, the cold taking my breath away. I came up, gasping, looking around for Mark. He was trying to stay up, his face white. I swam to him, my arms getting tired from the cold. As I got to him, I saw something coming up from the bottom of the lake. A figure, like a person, but icy. It was a woman, her skin pale and see-through. her hair long and flowing like seaweed. Her eyes were empty, black holes, but they looked right at us, making me shiver. She came up out of the water, moving slowly, carefully. She didn't talk, but I could feel her coldness and anger and sadness. She reached out a hand, her icy fingers going towards Mark. He pulled back, his eyes wide with fear. And then I knew. The heart carving, the thumping. This icy woman. She was connected to it. She was looking for something. Someone. Her boyfriend, maybe. Someone she had lost a long time ago. Someone who had forgotten her. And now she was back. To take him back. The icy woman looked at me. I felt a jolt of fear, like I knew I had to run, but I couldn't move. I was stuck, frozen in her cold stare. She took a step towards me, her empty eyes looking into me. I felt the cold coming from her, a chill that went through me. And then she spoke. Her voice was like ice breaking, a low, scary whisper that went across the frozen lake. He has forgotten me, she said, her voice full of hurt and anger. But will never forget. She reached out her hand again, this time to me. I knew what she wanted. She wanted Mark. She wanted to take him down into the lake, to be with her in her icy grave. I screamed, a sound of pure fear. I grabbed Mark's hand, pulling him towards me. We had to get out of there. We had to escape this icy ghost and her frozen heart. But as we turned to swim away, the ice under us started to crack again. The icy woman was coming up out of the water, her eyes on us, her face full of cold anger. We swam as fast as we could, the icy water making us numb. Behind us, we could hear the ice breaking, the sound like loud thunder across the lake. We got to the shore, falling onto the snow, breathing hard. We looked back at the lake, but the icy woman was gone. The heart carving was still there, but the ice around it was smooth again, like nothing had happened. The only sound was the wind, whispering in the trees. What did the icy woman want? Was she really trying to get revenge on a boyfriend who forgot her? Or was there more to her story? And what does her coming back mean for anyone who goes on the frozen lake? Tell me what you think in the comments. It was his ring, the one he was buried with, and then I heard him whisper my name. Rain lashed against the windows. of my small apartment, a fitting soundtrack to the melancholy that had become my constant companion. I, Ilara Jensen, age 28, a librarian, had moved into this quiet Brooklyn neighborhood after Damien. Damien, my fiancé, gone 6 months ago, taken by a sudden illness that had ripped him from my life, leaving a gaping hole in its place. The city, with its constant motion and fleeting connections, felt both overwhelming and empty. Here, in this quiet corner, surrounded by books and the comforting scent of old paper, I hoped to find some solace, some way to piece my shattered heart back together. But tonight, Valentine's Day, the ache of his absence was particularly sharp. I tried to lose myself in a novel, a classic romance, ironically. The words blurred on the page, my mind drifting back to Damien, to his warm smile, and the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed. We'd planned to spend Valentine's Day at our favorite Italian restaurant, a small, intimate place with flickering candles and the aroma of garlic and oregano. Now, the thought of it was like a knife twisting in my gut. A sharp rap on the door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. My only friend in the city, Chloe, was out of town. Hesitantly, I opened the door. A small velvet box sat on the welcome mat. It was a deep, midnight blue, tied with a silver ribbon. No card, no name, just the box. My heart skipped a beat. It was the kind of box Damien would have chosen. Elegant, understated. A wave of dizziness washed over me. Could it be? No, it was impossible. Damien was gone. He was gone. But my hand trembled as I picked up the box. It felt strangely heavy, heavier than it should have been. Back inside, I placed the box on my small writing desk. The velvet felt cool against my fingertips. I hesitated, a sense of unease creeping over me. This was strange, too strange, but a flicker of hope, a tiny spark of something I couldn't name, urged me forward. I untied the ribbon, the silver shimmering in the soft lamplight. Inside the box, nestled on a bed of black satin, was a ring, a simple, elegant band of platinum. Damien's ring, the ring he was buried with. My breath hitched. I stared at the ring, my mind reeling. How? How was this possible? A chill ran down my spine, a coldness that had nothing to do with the rain outside. This wasn't just strange. This was unnatural. I picked up the ring, my fingers brushing against the smooth, cold metal. It was heavier than I remembered. Much heavier. And then I heard it, a whisper, faint, barely audible, but it was there. Elara, my name. I whirled around, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was empty, just the shadows dancing on the walls, playing tricks on my eyes. It's just the wind, I told myself, trying to calm the fear that was rising within me. But the whisper came again, closer this time. Elara. I grabbed the poker from beside the fireplace, my hand shaking. I knew I wasn't alone. Something was in the apartment with me, something that wanted me. I moved through the rooms, each step echoing in the silence. The whispers followed me, growing louder, more insistent. Elara, Elara. I reached the bedroom door, my breath catching in my throat. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, the hinges creaking softly. The room was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside. And then I saw it, sitting on the edge of my bed, a figure silhouetted against the dim light. It was familiar, too familiar. It was Damien. My heart leaped with a mixture of hope and terror. Damien, I whispered, my voice trembling. The figure turned its head. My blood ran cold. It was Damien, but it wasn't. His face, it was gaunt. The skin stretched too tightly over his bones. His eyes, they were empty, hollow, lifeless, and yet they were fixed on me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. His lips parted, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too long. And then he smiled, a slow, predatory smile that sent shivers down my spine. Happy Valentine's Day, Elara, he whispered, his voice a guttural rasp. I screamed, a primal sound of terror. I stumbled back, tripping over the rug and falling to the floor. He stood up, his movements stiff, unnatural. He took a step towards me, and then another. His empty eyes bored into me, his smile widening, revealing rows of sharp, pointed teeth. I scrambled backwards, trying to escape him, but he was too fast. He was upon me, his cold hand grasping my wrist. His touch was like ice, burning my skin. I thrashed, trying to break free, but his grip was too strong. He pulled me closer, his face inches from mine. I could smell him, a cloying, sickly sweet scent, like rotting flowers. You can't leave me, Elara, he whispered, his breath icy against my cheek. And then he kissed me. His lips were cracked and blue, his touch like death. I felt a jolt of coldness, a searing pain that spread through my body. My vision blurred. My head swam. I felt myself slipping away into the darkness. The last thing I saw was his smile, a triumphant, predatory smile that would haunt my nightmares forever. And the last thing I heard was the sound of the rain whispering my name over and over again. Elara, Elara, Elara. What happened to Elara? Was it the grief, the isolation, or something far more sinister that claimed her? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I blinked, and the ice was closer. Yesterday, it was by my door. Now, it was next to my car, and carved into its frozen surface was my name. But that is not the part that made my stomach drop. Beneath my name, a new message had appeared. A date that had not arrived yet. I came to this cabin to get away. I was tired, worn down by years of working as a reporter, digging up ugly stories that never seemed to have a happy ending. At 34, I felt like I'd seen too much darkness. This cabin in the Montana woods was supposed to be a fresh start, a place where I could hear the wind in the trees and the fire crackling in the hearth. Nothing else. For 2 weeks, it was exactly what I needed. Quiet mornings with coffee, long walks in the woods, the simple rhythm of nature. But this morning, something was off. The air felt heavy, charged, and there it was, the ice. It was a huge block of ice, smooth and shiny, like glass. It looked out of place, sitting there in the snow. Yesterday, it was by the porch. Today, it was right next to my car. That was strange enough, but what made my blood run cold were the words carved into the ice. My name, clearly, deeply carved, like someone had meant for me to see it. And below my name, there was a date, February 12th. That was just a few days away. Today was the 8th. A chill went down my spine. Who would do this? I looked around. No footprints in the snow. The road leading to the cabin hadn't been touched in days. I was miles from any neighbors. It was like someone had appeared out of nowhere, left this chilling message, and vanished again. I pulled out my phone to take a picture of the ice, but the screen went blank the second I pointed it at the ice. The phone just died. My heart started to pound. I felt like I was being watched. I hurried back inside, locking the door behind me. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe some hiker had found my cabin and thought it would be funny to scare me. But something about it felt wrong, too deliberate, too creepy. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside, and I kept hearing noises, whispers, soft voices just outside the cabin walls. I told myself it was just the wind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, circling the cabin, watching me. At 3:14 a.m., I heard a knock. It was quiet, but clear. Someone was knocking on my bedroom window. I froze. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The knocking came again, closer this time, like it was moving along the wall towards the front door. I gripped the sheets, my body tense. Then it stopped. Silence. A heavy, scary silence. I forced myself out of bed and slowly walked to the window. What I saw made my blood run cold. The ice was on the porch again, and the carvings had changed. My name was still there, but now there was another message below the date. See you soon. It was like a threat, like someone was waiting for me, waiting for the 12th. I knew I had to get out of there. The next morning, I packed my bag. I didn't care if it seemed crazy to run away from a block of ice. I just knew I had to leave. But when I opened the door, the snow was different. It was deeper, thicker. It was hard to walk. And the ice was right in front of me, blocking the way. As I looked at it, I saw something else, a reflection inside the ice, a shape moving beneath the surface. It looked like me, but it wasn't me. It was like a twisted version of me, trapped inside the ice, staring out with wide, scared eyes. And then the reflection lifted its hand, the same hand that I had lifted, but I hadn't moved. The hand inside the ice had. I screamed and ran back inside, locking all the doors. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but the screen flickered and went black. The battery was dead again. The whispers started again, but this time they were inside the cabin, all around me. The air got colder, so cold I could see my breath. My reflection in the window moved slowly, a little behind me, watching me with a strange look. I felt dizzy, weak, and then I heard a voice. It was right next to me, whispering in my ear, "You are ready." Everything went dark. I don't remember anything after that. When I woke up, the ice was gone. The porch was clear. The air felt normal again. I wanted to believe it was all a bad dream, but when I went inside to get my bag, I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the bathroom mirror, someone had written something from the inside. Welcome back. I woke up to find something standing outside my window. It was not there when I went to bed. No footprints led to it, and worst of all, It looked just like me. I came to Winter Hollow for quiet. I needed to escape the city's constant noise, the crush of people, the draining demands of my job. At 29, I'd spent 7 years as an art restorer, carefully bringing old paintings back to life. My hands were skilled, precise, and trained to revive forgotten faces. But after my father died last fall, something inside me broke. I felt empty, hollow. So when I found a small cottage for rent in the middle of nowhere, I signed the lease without a second thought. The town was tiny, almost deserted. The few people who lived there all seemed to know each other, and they looked at me with a mix of curiosity and something else, something unspoken. Winters here can be rough, the old man at the gas station warned as I stocked up on firewood and food. Be careful of what the snow brings. I should have listened. The first night was peaceful. I unpacked, lit the fireplace, and watched the snow fall outside my living room window. The house was at the edge of the woods, no neighbors in sight, just an endless stretch of untouched white. It felt calm, almost serene. But the next morning, everything changed. A figure stood outside my window. At first, I thought it was a snowman, a silly prank. But as I looked closer, my stomach dropped. It was too detailed, too perfect. The shoulders, the shape of the face, the way the head tilted slightly. It was all eerily familiar. And worst of all, there were no footprints around it. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just a strange coincidence. Maybe a neighbor had built it as a joke. Maybe it was just my imagination. I hadn't been sleeping well since I moved in, and I was exhausted. But the next morning, the snowman had moved. It was right in front of my porch, facing the door. The features were clearer now. The ice sculpted into something disturbingly human. My face. I didn't go outside. I locked every door, every window, and closed the curtains. I tried to ignore it, to pretend it wasn't there. But that night, I heard it. A soft tapping on the glass. I froze. The sound came from the living room window, the one facing the porch. The snowman didn't have hands, but somehow it was knocking. I refused to look. Instead, I grabbed my phone and called the only number I had in town, Mr. Hewitt, the landlord. The phone rang a couple of times before a tired voice answered. "You saw it, didn't you?" My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" A long silence hung between us. Then he sighed. "You need to leave. Now." I swallowed hard, my hands clammy. What the hell is outside my house? More silence. Then, In a low voice, he said, "It's you." The call ended. A loud crash from the living room made my heart pound. My breath came in short gasps as I turned toward the noise. The window was broken, shards of glass scattered on the floor. The snowman was gone. I grabbed the fireplace poker, my hand shaking as I stepped forward. A wave of cold air seeped into the house, thick and suffocating. My pulse pounded in my ears as I looked out into the darkness. I expected to see nothing, but then I felt a breath on my neck. I whirled around, swinging the poker. No one was there, and then I saw it. The mirror above the fireplace. The reflection wasn't mine. It was a frozen version of me, its lips cracked and blue, its eyes hollow and glistening with frost. Its mouth moved, but no sound came out. I ran. I barely made it to the bedroom before I slammed the door shut, locking it. My hands were freezing, my breath visible in the cold air. My reflection hadn't followed me, but the whispers had. They slithered through the walls, soft at first, then louder, echoing through the empty room. "Come outside. Let me in." I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my hands against my ears. This isn't real. This isn't real. A loud creak. The bedroom door was unlocking. I had locked it. My breath hitched as the door slowly opened. A wave of icy air poured into the room. My body wouldn't move, my limbs numb with terror. And then, stepping into the moonlight, it appeared. Me, but not me. Its lips curved into a cracked, frozen smile, its empty eyes locked onto mine. You shouldn't have ignored me. The room spun, my vision blurred. I stumbled back, hitting the wall. My skin burned with cold, a deep, unbearable ache spreading through my veins. The last thing I heard before everything went black was the sound of my own laughter. When I woke up, everything was different. The house was warm, the fire crackling in the fireplace. The mirror was whole again, showing my face, perfectly normal. I let out a shaky breath, laughing at my own fear. I really need some sleep. I stood up, stretching, and walked to the window. The sun was rising, the sky pink and orange. I looked out at the snow-covered porch, empty. Relief washed over me. I had imagined it all. It was just stress, being alone, my mind playing tricks. I was fine. But as I turned away from the window, my reflection stayed behind. The flickering candlelight painted the room in dancing shadows, each one a phantom of a memory. I whispered her name, Claire, a breath barely audible in the stillness. The old wooden chair across from me creaked in response, a subtle protest against the silence. A chill, deeper than the winter night outside, settled over me. Had I truly heard a whisper beside my ear, a voice that belonged to the past, murmuring, "Stay"? I dismissed it as nerves, the residue of grief clinging to the air. But my hand, reaching for the wine, trembled, the crimson liquid shivering in the glass. Everything was perfect. The meal, the ambiance, the vintage she adored. Yet Claire was absent, a gaping hole in the fabric of the evening. Or was she? My gaze remained fixed on the empty chair. It wasn't empty, not entirely. The air around it shimmered, a distortion in the quietude. The cabin walls, once a sanctuary, now felt like they were closing in, the comforting warmth of the fire unable to penetrate the creeping cold. I forced a sip of the wine, the familiar tang, a fleeting anchor in the rising tide of unease. Then the chair shifted again, a minuscule movement, almost imperceptible. My pulse quickened, a drumbeat against my ribs. The clink of the wine glass against the table echoed too loudly in the oppressive quiet. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, extinguishing one of the candles. The shadows deepened, morphing into grotesque shapes. A nervous laugh escaped my lips. "You always hated the cold," I murmured, my voice a stranger in the vast emptiness. The memory of Claire stealing my jacket on a snowy night flooded my mind. "Your warmth felt different," she'd said, her eyes sparkling. Now only a bone-deep chill permeated the cabin. Hesitantly, I reached out and touched the plate in front of the vacant chair. It was ice, a shock that jolted through my fingertips, stealing the warmth from my body. I recoiled, my breath puffing out in the frigid air. My fingertips were tinged blue. The knife on Claire's plate moved. Slowly, deliberately, it scraped against the porcelain, a sound that sliced through the silence. Not an accident, not a trick of the wind. It was a calculated, purposeful action. Panic seized me, a cold fist clenching around my heart. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. The remaining candle flickered and died, plunging the room into near darkness. "Why are you here?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The wind howled outside, a tormented cry that mirrored my own fear. Then the voice returned, closer this time, right behind me. Stay. Every instinct screamed at me to flee. I stumbled towards the door, my fingers fumbling with the lock. The wind battered the cabin, a furious assault. I wrenched the door open, the icy blast stealing my breath. The snow crunched beneath my feet as I stumbled out into the night. But the forest was unnaturally still, the silence more terrifying than any storm. The whisper came again, closer, behind me. I glanced back. The chair was no longer empty. Someone sat there. I didn't think. I ran. The snowdrifts hampered my progress. The cold seared my lungs, but I didn't stop. Branches snagged at my clothes, but I pushed through them, driven by primal fear. The whispers pursued me, weaving through the wind, reaching out like spectral hands. I didn't slow down until I reached my car, my frozen fingers fumbling with the keys. The engine roared to life, the headlights piercing the blinding white. I didn't look back as I sped down the winding road, the cabin shrinking in the distance. But the cold clung to me, a constant reminder of what I had left behind. Miles later, I pulled over, my body trembling uncontrollably. My breath fogged the windshield as I tried to regain my composure. I reached for my phone, desperate for human contact. As I unlocked the screen, a notification popped up. A photo. My blood ran cold. It was me, sitting at the dinner table. My face was obscured by the shadows, but I knew it was me. I was smiling, but I hadn't taken that picture. A wave of dread washed over me. I scrolled through the photos, each one a different angle of me at the table, drinking, eating, talking to the empty chair. Had it been empty? I glanced in the rearview mirror. My breath hitched. Claire was in the back seat. Her skin was ashen, her lips blue. Her eyes were fixed on mine, unblinking, as if she had been waiting. I whirled around. The back seat was empty. My heart pounded against my ribs. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I looked back at the mirror. Claire was smiling. Then, slowly, she raised her hand and waved. A violent gust of wind rocked the car. My phone slipped from my grasp, landing face down. The headlights flickered, the darkness closing in. The car grew colder, frost creeping across the windows. I reached for the keys, desperate to escape. The phone screen lit up. One new message. My hand shook as I picked it up. The message was from Claire's old number. Impossible. She had been dead for a year. 2 words. Look behind. The back seat creaked. The engine died. The last thing I heard before the darkness swallowed me whole was her voice. Stay. The chipped ceramic mug warmed my hands as I stared out at the rain-streaked window. It was late October, and the Seattle gloom had settled in for the long haul. Inside my small apartment, the only light came from the desk lamp, illuminating the manuscript I was editing. I, Elias Vance, age 38, was a struggling novelist, more familiar with rejection slips than bestseller lists. My life was quiet, almost monastic, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of the city I called home. A sharp rap at the door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. Opening the door, I found a small, robin's egg blue envelope lying on the welcome mat. No return address, just my name, scrawled across the front in elegant cursive. Curiosity piqued. I picked it up. The paper felt thick and expensive. Inside, a single sheet of paper unfolded to reveal a short message. My breath hitched. The handwriting, it was undeniably familiar. It was Amelia's. Amelia. My Amelia. Gone for 5 years. A tragic accident, the police had said. A drunk driver, a dark highway, and a life extinguished far too soon. I'd mourned, I'd grieved, I'd tried to move on, but seeing her handwriting, it was like a punch to the gut. The note read, "Meet me where the willows weep at dusk." No date, no signature, just those chilling words. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was this some cruel joke? Someone trying to prey on my grief? But the handwriting, it was too perfect, too much like Amelia. I glanced at my watch. Dusk was fast approaching. The willows. There was a small park on the edge of the city, a place Amelia and I used to frequent, a place where the weeping willows dipped their branches into the still water of a small pond. A wave of dizziness washed over me. This was crazy, impossible, but a sliver of hope, a tiny ember of belief, flickered within me. I had to know. The park was deserted. The only sound, the rustling of the wind through the bare branches of the willows. The pond's surface was dark, reflecting the bruised twilight sky. A chill permeated the air, a coldness that seeped into my bones. I walked towards our usual spot, my steps hesitant. And then I saw her. She was sitting on our old bench, her back to me. Her long dark hair cascaded down her shoulders, just as I remembered. She was wearing a familiar dress, a simple blue cotton dress that she loved. My heart pounded in my chest. "Amelia," I whispered, my voice trembling. She didn't turn. "Amelia," I said again, louder this time. Slowly, She turned her head. My breath caught in my throat. It was Amelia, but it wasn't. Her face, it was gaunt. The skin stretched too tightly over her cheekbones. Her lips were cracked and blue, as if she'd been exposed to the cold for a long time. Her eyes, they were empty, hollow, lifeless. And yet, they were fixed on me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. A wave of terror washed over me. This wasn't Amelia. This was something else, something that had taken her form. I stumbled back, my mind screaming at me to run. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, trapped in the grip of a fear I'd never known. She stood up, her movement stiff, unnatural. She took a step towards me, and then another. Her cracked lips parted, and a voice that was both familiar and alien, whispered my name. Elias. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. She was getting closer, her empty eyes boring into me. I could see the frost clinging to her hair, the ice forming on her eyelashes, and then she reached out her hand. Her touch was like ice, burning my skin. I jerked back, finally breaking free from her gaze. I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the frozen ground. I didn't look back. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment. I slammed the door shut, locking it behind me. I leaned against the door, gasping for breath, my heart still pounding in my chest. I knew what I had seen. It wasn't Amelia. It was something that had taken her shape, something that had called me to the park, something that wanted what? I didn't know, but I knew one thing. I had to find out. The next morning, I went to the library, determined to find some answers. I spent hours researching local folklore, ancient myths, anything that could explain what I had seen. I found nothing, just stories of ghosts and spirits, legends and superstitions, nothing concrete. I went back to the park that evening, drawn by an irresistible force. I knew it was dangerous, but I had to know. She was there again, sitting on the bench, waiting. This time, I didn't approach her. I stayed hidden in the shadows, watching. She sat there, motionless, her gaze fixed on the pond. And then I saw it, a ripple in the water, a dark shape rising from the depths. It was her, Amelia, but not the Amelia I knew. This Amelia was pale, her skin translucent, her eyes glowing with an eerie light. She rose from the pond and walked towards the figure on the bench. They merged, the two figures becoming one. My mind reeled. What was happening? What was this place? What was this creature that had taken Amelia's form? I knew I was in over my head. This was more than just a ghost story. This was something ancient, something powerful, something that wanted something. And I was caught in its web. I left the park more confused and terrified than ever. I went back to my apartment, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I felt her presence everywhere, a coldness that clung to me, a whisper in the wind that called my name. The next day, another blue envelope arrived. This time, the message was different. Remember, it said. Remember what? I didn't know, but I knew I had to find out. I had to remember. But what if remembering was the very thing that would destroy me? What if the truth was more terrifying than anything I could imagine? And what if Amelia, or what was left of her, was trying to warn me? Or was she trying to lure me closer? The questions swirled in my mind, a dark vortex pulling me deeper into the mystery. What do you think happened to Amelia? Share your theories in the comments below. The old mirror in Evelyn's house seemed to watch me. It was big and dark, and at her party, something about it just felt wrong. I don't usually like big parties, but Evelyn's my best friend, and she talked me into it. The house was creepy, all old wood and whispering walls. Everyone was laughing and having fun, but I felt uneasy. Then I saw it, my reflection. It moved differently than me, a little behind, a little off. Goosebumps popped up on my arms. I took a step closer, and my reflection smiled. But I wasn't smiling. That's when I knew something was really wrong. I backed away, bumping into someone and spilling my drink. I didn't care. I just wanted to get away from the mirror. Evelyn asked if I was okay, and I lied, saying I was just dizzy. But I wasn't dizzy. I was terrified. I tried to enjoy the party, but I couldn't. The mirror's eyes followed me everywhere. I felt like it was inside my head, watching me, judging me. I couldn't wait to leave. Driving home, I kept looking in the rearview mirror, but I didn't see anything. I locked my apartment door behind me and tried to relax, but the feeling of being watched stayed with me. Later that night, I heard a tapping sound. It was quiet, but it woke me up. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from my bedroom mirror. My heart started racing. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I turned on the light and slowly walked over to the mirror. My reflection was there, but it looked strange, pale, sick. and behind it I saw something else, a dark shape moving in the glass. It was like my reflection was trying to get out, and something was holding it back. Then the shape moved closer, and I saw its face. It was me, but twisted, evil. It grinned at me, and then it stepped out of the mirror. I screamed and ran. I didn't even grab my phone or keys. I just ran out of my apartment and into the street. I could hear it behind me, its footsteps echoing in the night. I didn't look back. I just kept running until I reached my car. I jumped inside, locked the doors, and started the engine. I sped away, not knowing where I was going, just trying to get away from it. I looked in the rear-view mirror, and it was there in the back seat, smiling. It whispered my name. I slammed on the brakes, and the car skidded to a stop. I turned around, but the back seat was empty. I was alone again, or so I thought. My phone rang. It was a picture message. It was a picture of me sitting in my car, looking scared. But I didn't take that picture. Then I noticed something else. In the reflection of the side mirror, the thing was there, reaching for me. I dropped the phone and screamed again. It was right next to me, its face close to mine. Its eyes were glowing. It whispered, "Nowhere to run." I tried to start the car, but it wouldn't turn over. The thing laughed. A cold, cruel sound. It reached out and touched my arm. I felt a jolt of ice and everything went black. I woke up on my bed. The sun was shining through the window. I sat up, confused. Was it all a dream? I looked around the room. Everything seemed normal. I got out of bed and walked over to the mirror. My reflection was there, smiling back at me. But it wasn't my smile. It was its smile. I reached out to touch the mirror, and my reflection did the same. Our fingers met, and I felt another jolt of ice. Then my reflection stepped out of the mirror. It was me, but it wasn't me. It was the thing. It looked at me and said, "You're mine now." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The thing smiled, and then it grabbed my hand. It pulled me towards the mirror, and I felt myself being sucked inside. The world went dark, and then I saw myself. I was standing in the mirror, looking out at the room, but the room wasn't my bedroom. It was the room at Evelyn's party. I saw myself, the other me, standing by the mirror, talking to Evelyn. But Evelyn couldn't see me. She could only see the other me. The other me smiled at her, and then it turned and looked at me in the mirror. It winked. I tried to move, to warn Evelyn, but I couldn't. I was trapped inside the mirror, watching as the other me took over my life. It was like a nightmare. But I couldn't wake up. I was stuck, watching, helpless, as the thing wore my face and lived my life. And no one knew. No one suspected a thing. They all thought it was me, but it wasn't. It was something else, something evil, something that had stolen my life. And I was trapped, watching, waiting, until it decided to come back for me. The first time I heard my name that night, I thought it was the wind. The second time, it came from right outside my door. And the third time, it whispered from inside the house. I came to Hollow Ridge Cabin to find some peace. I needed to get away from the city. The noise, the emails, the constant pressure. At 32, I was a freelance illustrator, and I just wanted to be alone for a while, to breathe and figure things out. This cabin belonged to my grandmother. I used to visit her here as a kid. It's deep in the woods, miles from anyone else. The cabin had been empty for years, but after I lost Mark last fall, I couldn't stay in our apartment anymore. Everything there reminded me of him, so I packed my things, took some time off work, and drove 5 hours into the mountains. The first few days were really quiet. Too quiet. It was a strange kind of silence, like it was alive, pressing against my ears. I noticed every little creak in the old wooden floor. At night, the wind howled, whispering through the trees. It almost sounded like someone talking, but I couldn't understand what it was saying. I told myself I was just getting used to being alone, but on the fourth night, a blizzard blew in and everything changed. I was sitting by the fireplace sketching in my notebook when I heard it. A voice. Outside. It said my name. It was faint, carried on the wind, but I knew I'd heard it. My heart started beating really fast. I told myself it was just the wind, the storm playing tricks on me. But then it called again, closer this time, clearer. I stood up, my legs a little shaky, and went to the window. The snow was coming down so hard I could barely see past the porch. Then I saw something, a dark shape, standing at the edge of the woods. My breath caught in my throat. It couldn't be. It was impossible. The figure was tall and familiar, but something was wrong, really wrong. My hands started to shake as I looked for the lantern on the shelf. I finally found it, lit it, and pointed it at the window. The light shone through the snow, and for a second I thought, no, it couldn't be. The figure was wearing his jacket, Mark's black winter coat, the one he wore the day he left, the same jacket he was wearing when he died. I backed away, bumping into things, knocking over the lantern. The room went dark, except for the flickering shadows. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone, but there was no signal. My chest felt tight, like it was hard to breathe. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But then I heard it again. His voice. "Sarah, open the door." I hadn't heard Mark's voice in 6 months. I'd listened to old voicemails of his so many times, I knew them by heart. But this was different. This was here, in the room with me. I backed away from the door, my back pressed against the kitchen counter. "You're not real," I whispered. I could see my breath in the cold air. "You're dead." A sharp knock echoed through the cabin. Once, twice, 3 times. Each knock was louder, closer, vibrating through the wood. I was frozen with fear. I wanted to run, to hide, to get away from this nightmare. But the only way out was through that door, and I wasn't going to open it. Then I realized something. The whispering had changed. It wasn't outside anymore. It was inside. The words slithered through the air, wrapping around me like smoke. "Let me in, Sarah." I ran to the bedroom, locking the door behind me. My mind was racing. The air was freezing, like something was pulling all the heat out of the room. I gasped for air as I backed towards the bed. The whispers were everywhere, coming from the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Then the door creaked open. I had locked it. I spun around, almost falling. The room was empty, but I could feel it. Something was there. I grabbed my phone again, hoping for a signal, but the screen glitched and the battery went dead in seconds. The air was thick, suffocating, like something unseen was trying to make itself known. And then, in the mirror across the room, I saw it. Mark was standing right behind me. His face was wrong. His skin was pale and stretched too tight. His eyes, just black holes, stared at me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even think. Then he smiled. His mouth stretched too wide, showing teeth like ice. I ran. I didn't stop until I crashed into the front door, fumbling with the lock. But before I could open it, a cold hand grabbed my wrist. A hand that wasn't mine. I screamed, twisting away, shoving the door open. But outside, the storm had swallowed everything. There was nothing beyond the porch, just endless, empty white. And then footsteps, not behind me, ahead of me. I turned back, expecting to see him expecting the nightmare to drag me under. But the house was empty. The bedroom door was open. The mirror was cracked. There was no mark, no whispers, no voice. But as I stood there, breathless, shaking, I heard the worst thing of all, a quiet knock from inside the walls. And this time, I knew I had let him in. Hello guys, which story scared you the most? Let me know in the comments. And thanks for listening, everyone. If you stuck around until the end, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. As always, I'm looking for more story ideas, so drop a comment below with any themes or experiences you'd like to hear next. Stay safe out there, and until next time, keep your eyes open.